The emergency call came in at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning that would forever change how I viewed the darker corners of human nature. I'd been the city's sewer operations commander for 12 years, and in that time, I'd seen everything from alligators in storm drains to million-dollar drug operations running through our underground network. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared me for what I was about to discover in Sector 7 of the downtown maintenance tunnels. My name is Marcus Chen, and I've dedicated my life to keeping this city's underground arteries flowing smoothly. Most people don't think about what happens beneath their feet when they flush a toilet or watch rainwater disappear down a storm drain. They don't realize that there's an entire world down there, a complex ecosystem of pipes, tunnels, and chambers that requires constant vigilance and expertise to maintain. It's dirty work, unglamorous work, but it's honest work that keeps 2 million people healthy and safe. The call came from our automated monitoring system. Sensor readings in the Riverside district were showing unusual pressure variations and what appeared to be localized flooding in one of our access tunnels. Initially, I assumed it was another case of illegal dumping or perhaps a partial collapse, both common enough occurrences that wouldn't normally drag me out of bed in the middle of the night. But the readings were strange, inconsistent with typical blockage patterns. Something was moving down there, something that shouldn't be. I grabbed my gear and headed to the site with my emergency response team. Rodriguez, our best tunnel navigator, with 15 years of experience reading the underground like a roadmap. Sarah Kim, our environmental safety specialist who could detect hazardous conditions before they became life-threatening. And Tommy Tank Morrison, a former Navy SEAL who joined our crew after civilian life, proved too quiet for his taste. We were a tight unit, bonded by countless hours spent in the depths where teamwork meant the difference between going home safe and becoming another urban legend whispered about in city maintenance departments. The entrance to Sector 7 sits beneath an innocuous manhole cover on Maple Street, just 3 blocks from the courthouse where I'd testified in dozens of cases involving illegal dumping and environmental violations. As we descended into the humid darkness, our headlamps cutting through the familiar cocktail of scents that defined our workplace, I couldn't shake the feeling that this call was different. The sensor data kept nagging at me. Pressure readings that spiked and dropped in patterns that suggested something was actively moving through the system, not just blocking it. "Commander," Rodriguez's voice crackled through the comm system as we reached the main tunnel junction. "You need to hear this." I stopped, holding up my hand to signal the team to freeze. In the sudden silence, broken only by the constant drip of condensation and the distant hum of water processing equipment, I heard it, a sound that didn't belong in our underground world. It was faint, almost lost in the ambient noise, but unmistakably human. Someone was crying. "That's coming from the East Access Tunnel," Sarah whispered, her voice tight with concern. The East Tunnel was part of our older infrastructure, built in the 1940s with heavier construction that created better acoustics but also more dangerous conditions. It wasn't a place where anyone should be, especially not at this hour. As we moved toward the sound, following our established protocols for potential human contact in the tunnels, I found myself thinking about the darker side of my job. Over the years, we'd encountered our share of people seeking shelter in the tunnels, homeless individuals looking for warmth during harsh winters, runaway teenagers trying to disappear from impossible home situations, and occasionally people hiding from circumstances that drove them to desperate measures. Each situation required delicate handling, balancing safety concerns with human compassion. But as we drew closer to the source of the crying, the situation became increasingly bizarre. The sounds weren't coming from someone who'd wandered into the tunnels seeking shelter. This was different, more distressed, more urgent, and accompanied by what sounded like shouting from above ground. Through the thick concrete and steel that separated the underground from the world above, I could make out muffled voices engaged in what appeared to be a heated argument. "Tank, get me a reading on structural integrity in this section," I commanded, my training taking over as we approached what was clearly becoming a complex situation. "Sarah, I want environmental readings every 30 seconds. Rodriguez, map our exact position and identify all possible exit routes." The crying grew louder as we moved deeper into the East Tunnel, and I began to piece together what I was seeing. The tunnel ahead showed signs of recent disturbance, scuff marks on the walls, disturbed sediment on the floor, and most troubling of all, what appeared to be improvised barriers constructed from maintenance materials that should have been locked in our secure storage areas. "Commander!" Tank's voice carried a note of urgency that immediately commanded my attention. "I'm reading structural modifications ahead. Someone's been working down here, and they knew what they were doing." As we rounded the final bend before the source of the crying, our headlamps illuminated a sight that would haunt me for years to come. A section of the tunnel had been deliberately sealed off using a combination of official city materials and improvised barriers. The crying was coming from behind these barriers, along with the unmistakable sound of someone struggling against confinement. "This is Commander Chen," I radioed to dispatch, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my system. "I need immediate backup at Sector 7 East Access Tunnel. We have a potential unlawful imprisonment situation underground. Also, dispatch emergency medical services and have them standing by." But before dispatch could respond, the arguing voices from above grew louder and more distinct. Through the layers of concrete and steel, I could make out fragments of conversation that made my blood run cold. "Told you she was lying about the inspection. Down there until she agrees to drop the complaint. Nobody will believe her anyway, she's just some welfare mom." The pieces began falling into place with horrifying clarity. Someone had used their knowledge of city infrastructure to imprison another person in our tunnel system. The modified barriers weren't random. They showed understanding of our maintenance protocols and access to materials that should have been impossible for civilians to obtain. "Sarah, I need those environmental readings now," I commanded, my mind racing through the implications. If someone was sealed in that section of tunnel, oxygen levels could become critical quickly, especially in the older infrastructure where ventilation was limited. "Oxygen at 87% and dropping, Commander," Sarah reported, her voice tight with professional concern. "CO2 levels elevated but not yet dangerous. But if someone's been in there for more than a few hours..." She didn't need to finish the sentence. We all understood the math. The East Tunnel section wasn't designed for human habitation. Extended confinement could quickly become a death sentence. "Tank, Rodriguez, start working on those barriers. I want them down now, but carefully. We don't know the structural integrity of what's holding them up." I turned toward the surface access point, my jaw clenched with determination. I'm going topside to have a conversation with whoever thinks they can use my tunnel system as their personal prison. As I climbed toward the surface, the crying from below grew more desperate, punctuated now by what sounded like someone calling for help. But it was what I heard as I approached the manhole cover that transformed my professional concern into personal fury. "Karen, you can't just leave her down there," a male voice was saying. "What if something happens to the baby?" "The baby?" came the sharp reply, dripping with the kind of entitled venom I'd encountered too many times in city council meetings and budget hearings. She should have thought about that before she tried to get my restaurant shut down with her ridiculous health code complaints. Little Miss Perfect thinks she can cost me my business? Well, now she can think about it in the dark until she agrees to withdraw her statement. The voice belonged to Karen Whitfield, owner of Whitfield's Fine Dining, and a woman whose name had crossed my desk multiple times over the years. Her restaurant had been cited repeatedly for illegal grease disposal into city storm drains, creating expensive cleanup operations and environmental hazards. Each time, she'd found ways to delay compliance, tie up enforcement in legal challenges, or somehow make the problems disappear through what I'd always suspected were less than legitimate means. But this was beyond anything I'd imagined even Karen Whitfield capable of. I pushed open the manhole cover with controlled force, my headlamp illuminating the small group gathered around what should have been a routine maintenance access point. Karen stood with her back to me, gesturing emphatically at two men I didn't recognize. One appeared to be in maintenance coveralls, probably how they'd gained access to city materials and knowledge of tunnel layouts. "Good evening, Karen," I said, my voice carrying the quiet authority that comes from years of command responsibility. "I think we need to talk." The group spun around in obvious shock, Karen's face cycling through surprise, fear, and then settling into the defiant anger that had made her notorious among city MP. 3 hours later, as dawn broke over the city, I stood in the emergency room waiting area with coffee that had long since gone cold, my mind reeling from revelations that had turned everything I thought I knew about my job and my life upside down. The pregnant woman we'd rescued, Maria Santos, was stable and receiving care. But what she'd told me in those first coherent moments after her rescue had shattered my understanding of the corruption plaguing our city's infrastructure. "Commander Chen?" Dr. Elizabeth Harper approached me with the measured steps of someone delivering news that could go either way. "Mrs. Santos is asking for you. She says it's urgent. Something about her baby and why Karen Whitfield really targeted her." I followed Dr. Harper through the sterile corridors, my boots still caked with tunnel debris, drawing curious stares from hospital staff. Maria Santos lay propped up in her bed, an IV in her arm and monitors tracking both her vital signs and her baby's heartbeat. Despite her ordeal, her eyes burned with a fierce determination that reminded me why I'd dedicated my life to protecting people like her. "Mr. Chen," she began, her voice hoarse from hours of calling for help in the tunnel. "I need to tell you something before they try to make this about restaurant complaints. Karen Whitfield didn't lock me down there because of health code violations. She did it because I discovered something that could destroy half the city council and expose a corruption ring that's been operating for years." I pulled up a chair, my investigator instincts kicking into high gear. "What kind of discovery?" Maria reached for a manila envelope on her bedside table, her hands trembling slightly from exhaustion and stress. "I'm not just a concerned citizen who filed a complaint about her restaurant. I'm an investigative journalist working undercover on a story about municipal corruption. For the past 8 months, I've been documenting a network of bribes, illegal contracts, and environmental crimes that connect Karen's restaurant to city officials, contractors, and even police department supervisors." The envelope contained photographs, financial records, and what appeared to be transcripts of recorded conversations. As I flipped through the evidence, I felt my stomach sink. Names I recognized, city council members I'd worked with for years, contractors who'd bid on infrastructure projects, even supervisors in my own department, were all connected by a web of illegal payments and environmental cover-ups. "This is why she really targeted you," I said, the pieces falling into place. "The health code complaint was just the excuse. She knew you were getting close to exposing the whole network." Maria nodded, wincing as she shifted position. "But there's more, Commander. Something that makes this personal for you in ways you don't even realize yet." Before I could ask what she meant, my radio crackled with Rodriguez's voice. "Commander, you need to get back to headquarters immediately. Internal Affairs is here, and they're asking questions about your involvement in tonight's operation." Internal Affairs. My heart sank as I realized the implications. If the corruption network Maria had uncovered included people in my own department, then my rescue operation might have just painted a target on my back. "Maria, I need to—" "Wait," she interrupted, gripping my arm with surprising strength. "Before you go, there's something else. The baby I'm carrying, it's not just any baby. My husband was Miguel Santos, the city engineer who died in that tunnel collapse last year. The collapse that was officially ruled an accident. Miguel Santos." I remembered the case. A tragic incident in the north sector where a maintenance tunnel collapsed during a routine inspection, killing Miguel instantly. The investigation concluded that structural fatigue was to blame, but there had always been whispers among the crew that something didn't add up about the timing and location of the collapse. Miguel discovered irregularities in the tunnel contracts. Maria continued, tears flowing freely now. "Substandard materials, falsified inspection reports, kickbacks to city officials who approved the work. He was going to report it the day after he died. I've been continuing his investigation, and that's what Karen and her network were trying to stop." The hospital room seemed to spin around me as the full implications hit home. Miguel's death wasn't an accident. It was murder. And the corruption network that killed him had just tried to kill his pregnant wife to cover up their crimes. "The baby," I whispered, understanding flooding through me. "She's trying to kill Miguel's child." Maria nodded, her hand instinctively moving to her swollen belly. This baby is the last piece of Miguel, and in Karen's twisted mind, eliminating us both would close the loop on their cover-up. But she made one crucial mistake. She didn't realize that Miguel had a backup plan. She reached for another envelope, this one sealed and addressed to me personally. Miguel left this with instructions to deliver it to you if anything happened to him. He trusted you because you were the only city official who couldn't be bought, the only one who genuinely cared about the integrity of the system. My hand shook as I opened the envelope, finding a detailed report that Miguel had compiled documenting years of corruption in infrastructure projects. But it was the personal note attached that hit me like a physical blow. Marcus, if you're reading this, then they've silenced me, but the truth must survive. You and I have never been close, but I've watched you work for years. You're the only person in city government I trust completely. The enclosed evidence will expose a corruption network that killed good people and put thousands of lives at risk with substandard infrastructure. But there's something else you need to know, something personal that changes everything. Check the birth records for Marcus Chen, born March 15, 1978. Then compare them to Miguel Santos, born March 15, 1978. We share more than a birthday, brother. We share parents who gave us both up for adoption to different families. I've known for years but never found the right way to tell you. Now I'm leaving this burden to you, along with the responsibility to protect my wife and unborn child. The corruption network knows about our connection. That's why they'll eventually come for you too. Trust no one in the department until you've verified their loyalty. Save my family. Save our city. Miguel. The letter fell from my numb fingers as the impossible truth crashed over me. Miguel Santos, the man whose death I'd investigated, whose structural assessments I'd relied on for years, whose integrity I'd respected, was my brother. My twin brother, separated at birth and scattered to different adoptive families in the chaos of an overwhelmed social services system. He knew, Maria said softly, watching my face as I processed the revelation. He figured it out 2 years ago when he was reviewing old personnel files and noticed the matching birth date and similar facial features in your ID photos. He was planning to tell you after he exposed the corruption, but they killed him first, I finished, my voice hollow with grief and rage. The radio crackled again, more urgently this time. Commander Chen, Internal Affairs is requesting your immediate return. They're threatening to issue a warrant if you don't comply. Within the hour, I looked at Maria, at the monitors tracking the heartbeat of my brother's unborn child, at the evidence that could expose the people who'd murdered the twin brother I'd never known I had. The corruption network wasn't just trying to cover up financial crimes, they were systematically eliminating anyone who threatened their operation. Maria, I need to get you into protective custody. If they were willing to lock you in a sewer tunnel to silence you, they won't hesitate to try again. Already arranged, came a voice from the doorway. Detective Lisa Chang, someone I'd worked with on several cases involving crimes in the tunnel system, stepped into the room with 2 uniformed officers. Mrs. Santos contacted me while you were reviewing the evidence. I've been investigating. The corruption network from the law enforcement side and tonight's events confirm everything we suspected. Detective Chang had always struck me as one of the few completely honest cops in the city, someone whose investigations followed evidence rather than political convenience. If she was involved, it meant the corruption network had enemies in law, enforcement, as well as allies. How deep does this go? I asked, though I was already dreading the answer. Deep enough that Internal Affairs' sudden interest in your activities tonight isn't coincidental, Chang replied grimly. We have evidence suggesting that tonight's rescue operation was supposed to end very differently. Karen's network includes people with the authority to cover up whatever happened to Mrs. Santos, and potentially to you as well. She handed me a surveillance photo taken from a traffic camera near the tunnel entrance. It showed a city vehicle, one from my own department, arriving at the scene an hour before my team got there. The timestamp proved that someone had advanced knowledge of our emergency response and had positioned themselves to interfere with the rescue. That's Deputy Commander Morrison's vehicle, I said, recognizing the unit number. James Morrison, no relation to my team member Tank, was my second in command, a 15-year department veteran I'd trusted with sensitive operations and budget decisions. He had access to our emergency response protocols, our equipment storage, everything. Morrison's been feeding information to Karen's network for at least 2 years, Chang confirmed. We have bank records showing regular payments from shell companies connected to the